of those data. I will then move to the heart and the focus of this webinar, which is around administrative data on violence against women. And I would just share some recommendations from a background paper that we recently produced around guiding principles that should guide our efforts to collect administrative data on this area, a suggested minimum data set that we are putting and recommending for different sectors to collect, some issues around informed consent and the use of personally identifiable information, and ethical and safety and privacy issues around that, and also the steps that we are suggesting in this background paper for establishing and strengthening administrative data systems. We have the pleasure of having two colleagues from Kosovo, as you have seen or heard in the introduction, who will share with us their experience in strengthening their administrative data systems, multi-sectoral, and their efforts in creating a unique database, and how that process went, how that database looks like, the challenges they encountered, and they will go into very specific and practical recommendations and steps of how that took place. And then we will have some time for discussion. We would love to hear if you have questions, but we've also put together a few questions for you and things that we would love to hear from you on where you are in the process, which challenges you are encountering, which good practices you would like to share as well that perhaps we could learn, etc. So first of all, I would like to start with three questions for you to respond, so that we can set the tone of the webinar and understand a little bit where we are and what we want to talk about. So I don't know if colleagues could present the three polling questions. And I don't know if there needs to be any instructions or any guidance on how to respond to the three polling questions. So colleagues, if you can just click the response that you think is the right one for the question. And I'll give colleagues a minute. And the question is, police reports in a given country show that in 2018, there were 1,200 cases of domestic violence reported to the police compared to 750 in 2017. These data show that violence in the country has increased. Is that true or false? If we have a high response rate already, colleagues, those who can see that, maybe we can move to the next question. Great. So with the responses is that 75% of the respondents think that this statement is true, and 25% think that this statement is false. And we will go later to the questions again before I finalize my presentation. So can we move to the next polling question, please? And thanks, colleagues, for responding. I saw that there were not many participants who responded, so I would encourage all of you to respond to the second question. The second question says, prevalence of violence against women refers to the proportion of women in a country or region who experience violence against women in a certain period, or the number of violent events or incidents women in a country or region experience during their life. Please, if you can mark either one or both of them, if you feel that both of them are the right response. And again, I'll give you all a few seconds, but please, this is anonymous, so just respond, and it would be great to know.
If I may, Honka, I'll just intervene, because here there is the question in English and then in Arabic translated. And for participants, they need to answered both options so that they can be accounted as participating.
Okay, thanks very much for that clarification. So the order is the same. So if you can click both options so that the response is shown, that would be great. So 3 more seconds. And I think we are ready to see the results now. Okay, so I see different responses for the question in Arabic and the question in English, but more or less there's a sense that both responses could define what prevalence is. I think we're ready to move to the next question. The third and last question. Which says that the only unrecommended strategy to understand how the COVID-19 pandemic is affecting violence against women in a country under lockdown is conducting a remote population-based survey, either online, over the phone, or through SMS. True or false? And again, please respond to both the question in both languages so that they can be registered. We'll give 3 more seconds. And I think we can close the question and see the results. Okay, so the majority of respondents think that this statement is true, that we can use these data collection methods during COVID-19 to understand the impact of the pandemic on women. So I'm going to start with a presentation. Thanks very much for participating in this brief questionnaire, and we'll go to the questions at the end. Let me see if I can move my screen. So I just wanted to share here, and I know that many of you have participated in other webinars on violence against women, but I just wanted, so I didn't want to do an introduction of definitions of violence against women, but I just wanted to put here a few forms or very common forms of violence against women that happen across the globe, which include intimate partner violence, child sexual abuse, femicide or gender-related killings of women, economic violence, female genital mutilation, child forced and early marriage, dowry-related violence, and I have some figures here of some of these forms of violence. We know that in the last year, globally, 1 in 5 women who have ever been in a relationship have ever experienced violence by a partner. We know that 137 women across the world are killed by a member of their own family every day. We know that 650 million women and girls in the world today were married before age 18. At least 200 million women and girls alive today have undergone female genital mutilation. And we know that at least 45 countries do not have legislation around domestic violence. We have other forms of violence as well outside the family, such as sexual harassment at work, in educational institutions, or in other public spaces, violence condoned and perpetrated by the state, and rape and other forms of sexual violence by non-partners and non-family members. So when we think about data collection, when we think about administrative data or administrative data systems that allow us to understand violence against women in your country or in a given country or in a given region, these are the forms of violence that our data collection systems can help us understand. Throughout the years, there have been several normative frameworks that have called countries to start collecting and reporting on different forms of violence against women. The most recent one is the Agenda 2030 and the indicators of the Sustainable Development Goals. I'm not going to go in detail through all the indicators, and you have them here in this presentation that I think you will all receive, but I just wanted to show that under Sustainable Development Goal 5, we have indicators to understand the magnitude of intimate partner violence, of non-partner sexual violence, of legal frameworks around gender equality. We have an indicator on female genital mutilation, one on child marriage. We also have an indicator under Goal 11 around physical and sexual harassment in public spaces. And we also have indicators around homicides or killings of persons disaggregated by sex, which can be a good proxy to femicide or gender-related killings of women. We have an indicator around human trafficking disaggregated by sex, also sexual violence before age 18, and also reporting victimization to authorities. So just for you to know that, and you probably are aware of this, that countries increasingly throughout the years have been encouraged to adopt national level indicators aligned to globally agreed indicators for them to be able to report or to collect data and to report on different forms of violence as a very important step to understand what is happening in the country and also how the policies implemented are being effective, and also to inform the revision of policies and interventions and the adoption of new policies and new interventions. So just highlighting how data, it's just a very important pillar of any effort to design policies, legislation, and interventions to address violence against women. We have different data sources and different data collection methods to have data on violence against women. One is population-based surveys, and they allow to understand what is happening in the population. And surveying women means, as the best practice, usually like going to households, interviewing women when they are alone and in privacy and safety as conditions around their experiences of violence. And there exist methods, standards, and questionnaires to interview women about this in a way that is respectful, that is ethical, and that is safe. These surveys interviewing women about their experiences of violence allow to produce prevalence data and allow to understand the proportion of a population that is affected by a problem. In this case, the proportion of women who experience violence during a specific period. They're very helpful to understand the magnitude of the problem in a population. And these surveys usually allow to understand also what are risk factors or factors associated with the violence, which are the consequences of the violence, that consequences they may have in health, in well-being, in the community, in the family, also how women seek help and if they receive help or not. So these surveys allow us to understand what is the situation of violence in a country. Prevalence rates and what we can get through surveys allow us to count people, like how many women and what proportion of the women in a country experience violence, but they don't allow us to count incidents or events, how many violent acts have happened or have those women experienced. Other potential data sources, which is actually the focus of this webinar, is administrative data. These are data that are kept by services, usually services who support women or services that women who experience violence get in contact with, which are health services, police, justice, and social services. So this is part of the usual and routine operations of these services. And when they provide services to women, they have the opportunity to record data on potential experiences and cases of violence that these women may experience. These administrative data or data that are collected by services allow us to understand the number of cases or incidents of violence against women that are reported to their services. They may be helpful in understanding or estimating the needs for such services and their costs. If they allow us to say, every month we see like 100 women in this health service or in this police station, 100 cases that are related to violence. And usually the month of March is the one with highest rates. So they help to understand the needs and costs. They can also help understand what are the responses of the sectors and how the needs of women are met. For example, of all the cases that are reported, which proportion are investigated? And of all of those cases investigated, which proportions are, or proportion of cases are convicted? And they can also contribute to evaluating the response of these services that women turn to. Administrative data cannot provide an estimate of the magnitude of or the prevalence of the problem. Just allow us to say the women who have sought help or who have reported their cases of violence. So I wanted to show this around for us to understand what data tell us and what they don't tell us. So we have, as you can see here, the actual prevalence. So how many women in a society experience violence? We have in blue the women who, and that's the bigger circle, everything that is in light blue. In darker blue, we have the women who, when we interview them, they tell us that they have experienced violence, and it's usually a good representation of what is happening in the population. And then we have the administrative data, which is the gray here, which is from all the women who experience violence, the one who report their cases to services. And it's usually only the most severe cases. So it doesn't represent the whole, the real magnitude of the problem, but just those severe cases that go and get in touch with services. We also have qualitative studies such as interviews. We can go and interview women or men or communities. We can do group discussions. And these data collection methods or information collection methods don't provide numbers, but a deep understanding of the experiences of women and sometimes those of men as well, like what drives them to perpetrate violence. And this information sometimes accompanies surveys, and they can be done earlier to inform the surveys or later. We know that during the pandemic of COVID-19, data have become very important to understand the impact of the pandemic in the experiences of women and in their lives in general, but also in their experiences of violence. But we know that interviewing women when they are locked at home, and in some cases locked at home with their potential abusers, and when they don't have freedom of movement to seek help, may put them indeed at higher risk. So doing surveys on violence against women remotely through a phone, online, or through a text can actually, we need to put many safety guards in place to make sure that they don't put women at higher risk. So in this case, administrative data actually have become very important, and understanding if during the pandemic, more women have reported their cases of violence, different cases of violence, or different forms of violence, or actually if the reports have decreased because women don't have the freedom to call or to go, or because the services are not available. Administrative data can become very important in this context of the pandemic. We, as UN Women, and together with other agencies such as WHO or UNFPA, put together a few recommendations that you see here. They are in Arabic, and in the presentation I've included the link to the resources below with recommendations on which are good data collection methods to understand the impact of COVID-19 on violence during the, on violence, and which are the safety and ethical standards that you can consider. But again, just to highlight, administrative data have become extremely important in this context. And then I just wanted to go very briefly through a background paper that sets a few guiding principles and recommendations to collect administrative data on violence against women. I want to go very quickly through this because it's going to be my colleagues Viora and Albina who are going to share actually in a very practical way how these recommendations that we have put together in this background paper can be applied in the country context. But I just wanted to put them here for us all to be aware of some things that if you in Saudi Arabia are considering strengthening your administrative data systems on violence against women or establishing a unique database, things that it would be good for you to consider if you haven't done so. And if you have, it would be great to hear how you have considered and implemented this. So some guiding principles here, and I'm not going to get into detail, but data collection, data analysis, and data use from these services should have a rights-based approach, always be culturally and age appropriate, always have gender equality and empowerment of women at the front and at the core, be centered in the survivor, and not forget that this is always to improve the life of survivors, ensure that safety is paramount, and also make sure that the data collection and the data use are used to ensure perpetrator accountability. I think I've already mentioned this, that administrative data can be used, for example, to monitor use of services and to monitor the demand for those services by women. It can be used to understand whether services are delivered according to standards, if the quality services are being delivered. They can help for case management within and across sectors to understand what is the path that women take, where do women get stuck, like at which part of the chain of seeking help women, something doesn't work. It can also help estimating the capacity of services, costing and resource allocation. We propose in this paper a few data points that we would recommend for different sectors to collect. One is the type of violence that women experience. So when women get in contact with these services and data are collected, it would be good to record at the minimum this data, the type of violence that women experience, the date that the violence occurred, some information about the survivor, and mainly sex, age, and the relationship with the perpetrator, some information about the perpetrator and at least the sex and age, registration of the event, when the event was reported and who registered it, where the violence occurred in terms of the city where it happened, and also the location, if it was in a bus, if it was at home, if it was at work. Also, if the violence was perpetrated online using a computer or other technology, and we know that this is increasing, and it's interesting to have data on that and helpful to design policies and programs. And then the response, whether services were provided and whether there was a referral to other services. I think Viora and Alvina will talk about this, but this is a very important issue to be considered when considering the strengthening of administrative data systems, and is ensuring informed consent by the women who report violence for their data to be used, and then also the use of personally identifiable information and issues around security and privacy of using that. So some recommendations we make is set up distinct roles and responsibilities for data collection, for data aggregation, for data analysis, and for data reporting. So the service provider may have access to specific information, but the person who is, for example, aggregating the data for analysis may have access to much less information, and for example, and for the personally identified information to not be available and just use unidentifiable information. It's important also to establish standard operation procedures for informed consent for data collection and for the use of this personally identifiable information. The same for case management. Also data linkage, some standards for linking data across sectors using personally identifiable information, protecting privacy, having information sharing protocols if the idea is to share the data across different sectors, like between police, justice, health, and then have role-based data access, which is what I mentioned before, have different roles and responsibilities for people accessing the data. And then I wanted to finish by just outlining steps for establishing or strengthening administrative data systems that we put together in the background paper. And also you have the link to the background paper in this PowerPoint presentation. First, mapping who the data producers and the data users are. Second, establishing a coordination and governance mechanism. Third, establishing and implementing training of those who will be collecting, analyzing, aggregating, and reporting the data. Establishing responsibilities and standards for the whole process. And then having a thinking about how you are going to report. How are you going to make those data public or non-public? How are you going to ensure that the data are used to inform policies and programs? And I think our colleagues from Kosovo will provide specific examples of how these steps were done in their country. This is all from me. I just wanted to finish with, before I give the floor to the colleagues in Kosovo, with the polling questions. And after the presentation, I hope that some of you have a clearer, or maybe some of you have changed the answers that you would give to these questions. On the first one, if in a country, cases reported of domestic violence reported to the police have increased from one year to another, that doesn't necessarily mean that violence has increased. That means that violence, the report of violence has increased, but maybe the number of women who experience violence in the country remains the same, or it has decreased. It may be the result. Maybe more women are reporting to the police because the police has better standards for delivering services, because it's much more sensible and sensitive to how they deliver services, because the quality has increased, because women have more awareness about their experience, their violence, and that's why they report to the police. So it doesn't necessarily mean that violence has increased, but just that more women are reporting their experiences of violence. On the second one, just to summarize, prevalence means the proportion of women who experience violence in a country, not the number of incidents that happen. That doesn't represent the prevalence of violence, but just the incidents that are reported, which is only a small proportion of the actual number of women who experience violence. And then, as we have said, doing remote surveys through over the phone, SMS, online is not the only, and it's not the most recommended way to collect data in a context of lockdown during COVID-19, because that can put women at higher risk of violence. It can be done if safety and ethical measures are put in place, but there are many other strategies and many other data collection methods, as we can see, to understand that, such as using administrative data records and doing qualitative studies, for example, or using media reports. So that's all from my end. I'm ready to give the floor to the colleagues from Kosovo. I don't know if the organizers think that now would be a good point to address some of the questions that have been coming in the chat, or if you prefer that we move to the colleagues in Kosovo, which I think are going to give a little bit of practicality to a little theoretic issues that I have raised in the presentation. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Janica. I have one question, actually. I couldn't find any questions in chat related to our topic. Would you like if I ask now or later in the end? Janica, are you with me?
Yeah, I think I'm happy to respond now if it's one question, and then we move to Kosovo.
Okay, based on my understanding, you prefer to combine both the registries and surveys data, which I totally agree with you. In Saudi Arabia, we have this scenario. We have more than 10 entities or organizations reported domestic violence. Do you face this issue in Kosovo, or you have one source, which is police station?
I will let the colleagues from Kosovo respond to that, because that's precisely what they're going to present. And they have different services and different sectors reporting, and their whole effort was to make sure that there is one database where they can compile the data from different sectors and different data sources. And that's actually a challenge and an effort that many countries are trying to address, that the definitions, the forms of violence, the way data are recorded by different sectors are very different. And sometimes it's very difficult to understand what is the picture in the country? Like, are we, is it the same woman who is going through the process? So there's no problem in reporting or double counting what's happening in different sectors, but it's good to have a good understanding of what happens across different sectors, and for sectors to speak to each other, so that the picture of what happens, it's clearer. But I let Viora and Albina respond to that very good question.
Thank you so much. Now we will move to our second distinguished speaker, who is Dr. or Flora, right? She will talk about Kosovo experience.
Thank you very much, Junkal. Thank you to the host. It's a pleasure and honor to speak from Kosovo for you. I will try to be brief and practical, and then of course we are open to discussion. Hope everyone is good and healthy in this very difficult time with COVID. So yeah, Kosovo is a rather small country with, just to give you an overview about the Kosovo, but also in terms of legal framework on violence against women and what was missing and what we are doing. So we have the Ministry of Justice, and one of the deputy ministers of justice is actually, according to the law, the National Coordinator Against Domestic Violence. And then we have the law against domestic violence, and we have the National Strategy Against Domestic Violence. Just recently, Kosovo Constitution was amended, so we have added the Istanbul Convention into the Constitution of Kosovo. Therefore, it will proceed with revisions of the laws in accordance with the provisions of Istanbul Convention. The Criminal Code of Kosovo has already been revised, and the provisions of Istanbul Conventions have been included. As you know, some of you maybe who don't know, one of the pillars of the Istanbul Convention is actually the database, and Unkal already provided like a theoretical part. What are the conditions, how important it is to have the data, and why is it important? And in Kosovo, usually the cases of violence against women were reported either to police. Sometimes women would feel safer going directly to the shelter, to the doctor, social service, etc. So we started this project funded by EU. It was a 4-year project with the aim to establish an integrated database where all of these institutions that were providing services to the DV survivors will come together and insert information into one database. So the process started in December 2017, and then we had the signing of the agreement with a partner. It was through an IT company. I mean, it was very challenging. It was also many unknowns during the process, because this was the first time that the country would have such a unique database. And then the Minister of Justice actually in that time decided that the database will sit in the Ministry of Justice. So it's very important to have one institution, one body that will be in charge of database. And then there were negotiations between him and other institutions who provide services, such as police, because there were, in our case, it was police who wanted to keep the database because they said the cases are coming to us first in most of the cases. And then it was the prosecution and judiciary that were saying that we have our own databases. We don't want to have another database. And then the social service, etc. So there was also, it took us some time together with the Ministry of Justice in this conversation with institutions to convince them how important it is to have one unified database for the cases of domestic violence. And it finally ended with an MOU being signed between the Ministry of Justice, the State Prosecutor's Office, the judiciary, and police, where they have agreed that all civil servants, so all the service providers from the relevant institutions will insert the information in the database. There was also a manual developed for the database users, how to insert the information, and then it started with a whole range of trainings, not just at the central level, but local level, including municipalities, etc. In Kosovo, we also do have the DV coordination mechanisms within municipalities, and they also played a critical role in informing the other civil servants how important it is to have the database, because some civil servants at the municipal level, for them, they consider that this is additional burden to their work, you know? So that's why it was, in a way, time consuming to explain to them instead of putting the information in written, they would put it in one database where everybody would have access. The process of designing databases, I said, was very complicated. We had to work with the State Agency for Protection of Personal Data, because it's Kosovo is also a majority women country with majority of Muslims, and we had to be very, and the personal information is very important for everyone. So we had to make sure that also the DV survivors would feel safe, including their families, when inserting the data and the personal data. And this process of designing the database was done in close cooperation with the State Agency for Data Protection. So what is important, I mean, Albina will go from the practical part and technical part, how the database looks like. But what was important for us also was to have in the database all types of violence. So all the types of forms of violence defined by the Istanbul Convention are actually the part of the database. And then what is important about the database is the tracking system. So we don't have only the statistics in the database, like where the violence has happened, is the repetitive violence, information about the perpetrator, about the status of the DV survivors, is it married, is it in a partner relationship, is it employed, what is the level of education, primary school or secondary school or higher education, etc. But what is important about the database is the tracking system, which will enable our institutions to track where do we have the gaps in terms of providing services. And you can see in the database where the case is standing. Is it stocked in police? Is it in prosecution, or is it in the judiciary? And this will help a lot our institution to address the problems within the system. And I'm sure, I mean, like in every country, there are delays in proceeding cases, not just of violence against women, but also other cases. So this is also another characteristic of the database that will help the institution to address the problems within the system. What is also very important is that we are in the process, so the database is still a live database. It's improving because, of course, in the first ways we couldn't make still the best and the most beautiful database. It's also the visuals, also the information that will be available for the public, for researchers, for other institutions. So when we are in the phase of designing these visuals, like the graphicons, about the statistics that others outside of database with limited access will be able to have this information for the reason like to develop different strategies, to prepare different researches, etc. So it gives a wide range of information, such as the region where it's happening, how often it's happening, etc. And it's all with codes, and this part will be explained later with Albina. For Kosovo, as I said, the COVID pandemics actually, I mean, showed, besides informing us about the problems that we have in the system, actually the database helped us a lot in detecting the cases, in intervention and providing assistance with women where there were most violent cases reported. So also in Kosovo, the violence against women increased by 30% during COVID. So through the database and in close cooperation with the Ministry of Justice, we were able to see where it's happening most, like why it's happening. Is it because they are poor? Is it because they are far? Because you also see the geographical part where the violence is happening, etc., etc. And not just the institutions, but also international actors, the international donors, we were able to to intervene directly in coordination with institutions and provide the assistance. Health sector is still not part of the database, and we are expecting to also link the health sector because we know how important it is, and they are direct service providers to the survivors. So this is another like a gap that is still not filled, but so far shelters, police, social service, judiciary, prosecution are already part and are inserting the information in one unified database for the cases of domestic violence. I will hand over to Albina. Albina is our colleague who is working within the Ministry of Justice. She's an IT person and she's the one currently managing the database, but also providing trainings for the service providers and answering to the questions of the service providers whenever they have something unclear, to be able to insert the database wherever they are in their municipalities. Albina, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Viola. At the same time, it is a pleasure and I feel honored to be among all of you today. I want to thank all of you for the time that you will dedicate to me. Now, I will start to present the database for identifying cases of domestic violence, how it works and what functionality it has. The system is unique and a self-created model that has been not been taken from anyone. The system is adapted to the requirements of the institutions. It is created in collaboration between them and is aimed at fulfilling demands of the actors or stakeholders. It is designed for easy use. Those authorized person can place data into the system. System is designed to function as an integrated database for many institutions that provide services in cases of domestic violence. There are 6 institutions that integrate data into systems. They are police, Center for Social Work, victim defender, shelter, prosecution, and the court. The database is functional. Officials can connect without any problem on it, and they have access to record their data. Currently, the system is operational in 2 languages, Albanian and Serbian. In the future, it will also be translated into English. The case can be registered by the institution where the victims appears for the first time. It is important to note that the first step we need to take before we start registering a new case is to search the victim or suspect with his personal number or passport number. This check should be done because the ID may have been previously registered in the database. If the ID has been registered, then we only need to transfer the data record from the database to our new case. What does it mean? That victim or suspect or perpetrator or recidivist, and we are just opening the new case with the people that are already on the database. Otherwise, if the ID does not exist in the database, then we start with a new case registration. And the table that you are looking at shows how a new case is registered. For the old institution, the tables where the case data will be filled in are the same. Each institution has its own tab or button where only the official person of the institution can access. What is very important, no one can see the work that others are doing. The details of what official can see is in the button called case card here. In the case card button are shown in tabular form the result of the actors or stakeholder services for each case, which I will present to you later. The system does not allow to duplicate registration of a case that was previously registered. The data that are recorded are of particular importance as they ultimately produce statistics from which domestic violence can be viewed and analyzed from many dimensions. In this page, the official is authorized, has to fill out the information in the field of the application here. All of that are mandatory. For example, the date of the incident, the time of the incident, the danger level of the incident, the address of the incident, the municipality where the victim of the incident, the municipality where the victim lives. All of that are mandatory. To the part, the scene of the incident, where there is an option to select a button urban or rural, are very important for providing statistical information of the case in many zones. Then, if the embassy has been notified about the case, or if the case is recidive for family violence. In the second part of this table, the officials have a possibility to select one of the three options if suspect or under the influence of the alcohol, under the influence of narcotic substances, or with mental disorders. And in the other part of page, they have to put the number of witnesses. After the information is given about the case, we should always press the save button. General data of the victim or suspect after the case has been registered. Then we continue with the registration of general information for the victim and suspect or perpetrator. In the page that you are looking at, it shows how the registration works for general data of the victim and suspect. First, we start with the registration if the victim or suspect is Kosovo citizens or foreign citizens. After, there is an option of selecting if the victim or suspect has or doesn't have documents. Next, we start to fill out the information here, where we need to register their personal number, name, surname, state, nationality, date of birth, if the victim or suspect has any disabilities, and lastly, if they are in LGBTQ category. After that, we continue with random notes. If the person in this case is a victim, is suspect, or both of them victim and suspect, then continue with their age, with their job, marital status here, education, economic situation, etc., etc. After we have filled out all the information, we should press the save button. The victim and suspect relationship. After we have registered all the information about the victim and the suspect, there is a possibility of connection between two of them. So we choose one of the options, such as, for example, husband, brother, father, fiance, stepdaughter, etc., etc. Case reference to other actors. After the registration of the victim and suspect has been made, and the relationship between them has been filled out, the next step is to refer the case to the actors or stakeholders, depending on which institution is needed, selecting, as in the figure, an option. For example, to the shelter, to Center for Social Work, to victim defender, to police, to prosecution court. Each institution has its own button to register their services. After we have registered the case, all of the institutions must register their services that they provide. After clicking on their button or tab, they register their services that have provided in relation to the case, where each time they have an option to record the date when that services was given. All of this services, all of this information or services has possibilities to generate as a statistics by the database. Except this, police, prosecution, and court also can register the criminal offenses. Also, the criminal offenses can generate it as a statistics by the database. The court, apart from the services and criminal offenses, they also register the measures and the decision how the case will end. This part is divided in two categories, on civil and criminal, which means that information will be generated separately for each category. Case card button, all of this information, including services, criminal offenses, measures, decision, they are provided from the institution related to the case, are presented to the case card button, which where you can clearly see where the case has gone to and what has happened to it. An example is shown in the figure, how the case has passed from one institution to another. For example, starting with the police, then the case was referred to Center for Social Work, after that to victim defender, and so on. Registered cases. Here is presented how the official in his or her user can see the cases that are registered in the database. This helps the officials a lot because they can keep also as a cases report for themselves, which clearly present in which cases they have been involved to identify cases of domestic violence. To see the cases, they have to click on details, whatever. Another step is statistic by cases, yes. After the victim, suspect, or perpetrator services, criminal offenses, decision, measures of the case are registered, now the database can generate the statistics. The statistics that are generated from the database are different, which means that the database generates different types of statistics, and it all depends on the selection of filters. They are in the case level, continue with the statistics according to the victim, statistics according to the perpetrator, statistics according to the services, statistics according to the criminal offense. Also, the database can generate detailed statistics for all institutions, where we can combine different filters depending on what we are looking for to get much faster and more detailed result. We have named this type of statistics query database, but I will show you with some examples on following next. Last but not least are statistics based on the court decision. Here in this page are presented statistics according to the case, which we can which we can make a choice for a certain period of time, as well as the possibility of solving the different filters which are divided into the regions. In our case, I choose here on select to select filter, I choose the filter according to zones, so that we can show how many cases we can in each zone, in urban and in rural. Then we have the number of cases that are divided into the regions, and in the end we have the percentage, which is calculated based on the total number of cases for the whole country. All the statistics have the option to be exported in the Excel form by pressing the export button. After the exportation of the report into the report in Excel, we can generate different diagrams depending on the values generated by the database. Statistics by victim and statistics by perpetrator. In this page, there are statistics which the database can generate it for the victim and the perpetrator for a certain period of time in both of them, which we have chosen the filter based on their gender, male and female. The filter that we can choose to generate these statistics are by marital status, by gender, by economic situation, by education, by age, incident time, and employment. In this table, the division is made by a region here, how many males and females there are, and then the total of number in general. And in the end, we have also the percentage, which is calculated based on the total number of cases, and every time we have an option to export in Excel form. Statistics by services. Another type of statistics that the database generate are based on their services, where I said every institution register their services that they provide. In the database, their names are known as grouping by police services, grouping by Center for Social Work services, grouping by prosecution services, grouping by shelter services, grouping by court services, and the last one is the grouping by defender of victim services. I took from the database only one of them, the grouping of services according to the police, because the others are the same. Whenever we generate statistics, they are divided according to the regions or according to the municipalities. It depends on the option we choose. Then the total number of cases, and in the end, is always percentages. And every time we have an option to export in Excel form. In the horizontal row, you have the names of the services that they provide by the police. Another type of statistics are statistics by criminal offenses, where only the police, prosecution, and court can store information in. In the database, their names are known as grouping by criminal offenses in the police, grouping by criminal offenses in the prosecution, and the last one is grouping by criminal offenses in the court, which are also divided into the regions or municipality. It depends from a choice. The percentage is always calculated, and every time we have the possibility of the exporting statistics in Excel form. Again, in a horizontal row, you have the names of criminal offenses that provided by the institution. Here. More important are detailed statistics. The detailed statistics are in the level of the case and in the level of the person. The statistics that are in person's level have the ability to pick the category that they need, victim or perpetrator. To the first choice here. In the detailed statistics, as the case may be, with the selection of filter, within a certain period of time, I have chosen the roles of the shelter. Then the user that defines the regions, and I have as the database for a type of services. For example, the victim was released here. What does it mean? How many victims were released during this period? And I click display statistics or show the result of. The result that has appeared is that in shelter X, for example, with user X, within this period of time here, one victim was released. Meanwhile, at the statistics based on the person, there's an option to pick victim or perpetrator, and I pick the victim. And I ask the database that within this period of time, is there any victim on age 19 here who is registered on the database and belongs in the LGBT category? After the results from the selected filter has appeared one victim. This is reason why we call detailed statistics, because we are able to use different filters in database and to make different combination of statistics. And at the end, but the most important are the statistics according to the court decision. I also mentioned earlier that the judges also register the measure and decision, where they show how the case ends. In cooperation with them, they are divided in two categories, in civil and in criminal. With the generation of the statistics, it is much easier to address the policies where the situation should be more improved. In the page that you are looking at, I have displayed an example for each category. In criminal part, I have chosen the filter main penalties within a certain period of time, where I ask the database, how many cases are imprisonment? The results show there have been no cases during this period. And to the civil part, I have chosen the filter health status, and I ask the database, how many people with disabilities are within this period of time? The results show there have been no cases during this period. This is all that I had to share with all of you today. If you have any question in relation to the functionality of the database, I am here. You can write me here in chat, or for any ambiguity, or in the following days, you can send me an email and I will respond to you. I reply to you as soon as possible. Again, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Albina. Actually, we have one question. I have it in Arabic here. I will try to translate it. They're asking whether they have any difference when report the case in terms of whether I'm physician or social worker or police officer. So do you in your platform, for example, is there any certain form, for example, should be filled by police officers and another form should be filled by physicians who have suspected cases? Albina?
Yes. I said in the beginning of presentation, they had the same tables where they have to fill all the information. What they have only to do is to click on their tab, and after clicking their tab, they have an option when they have to attach their services, their criminal offenses, their whatever.
Even if they are physicians or social workers?
Just to clarify, physicians, the doctors are still not part of the database, but 6 other institution service providers are part of database. So horizontally, they just click on their institution. Is it police or is it a social service? And then it displays automatically the buttons that they can, or the information about the survivors that they should file in the system.
Okay, because someone asking if physicians received suspected case, they have or violence incidents, how they would act?
In Kosovo, they report immediately to police. So the physician calls the police.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Is there any question? السادة الحضور، هل في أسئلة باللغة العربية؟ at least تكتبوها في جزئية الأسئلة.
There is a question.
Have you received any false report? How you deal with false report? Albina?
Can you repeat it again, please?
As my understanding, there are many actors fill different forms
Yes.
based on their roles. Okay.
Yes.
Sometimes, is there any likelihood somebody will fill a form by mistake, and how you deal with this in data management or clearance.
Yes, the officials do not have access to delete the cases or even edit them, because who knows for what purpose it makes a difference. Only the system administrator can make this change, of course, with the approval of the leader of the respective institution.
So my understanding is that they submit a request to the Ministry of Justice to make the necessary changes in case they did a mistake. This is just to avoid any kind of misunderstanding or double information and protect also the safety of DV survivors. So only Albina in this case can make the necessary changes through a request.
Only the system administrator,
Yeah.
not Albina.
Yeah, the system administrator.
Yes.
And also another question. Is there any data protection law to protect the human rights in your platform?
Yes, Kosovo has a law, and also it has an agency that it is a very high level state institution within the Prime Minister's office that is in charge for the data protection or the protection of personal data. And they were the ones actually involved throughout the process of designing the database as you see it now.
Nice. Thank you so much. What about education either for victim or suspect? Okay, there is a question. They are asking about is there education or spread the awareness for the victims or suspect about their right to report?
Maybe I should reply here because in Kosovo is rather small country, and we continue to, not just UN Women, but also organizations work a lot on awareness raising and sharing the information to the victims in municipalities, in villages, about where they can report for the violence. Just now, for example, with the police, we have, besides the application that police has where you can report different types of data, we have helped them to add an icon specifically on domestic violence, and this is what is being promoted now. So during COVID, for example, we did a huge campaign, like within 1 week, it reached out to more than 1 million people to inform people because as Junkal said, they were locked within the perpetrators without no way to move. So we did immediately with the government, the ministry, first of all, to do the emergency protocol where they can go directly to emergency quarantine to protect the safety of other survivors in shelters. And then there were a huge campaign with government to ensure, even the prime minister, the president of the parliament came forward in media, in every media, calling for DV survivors to report the cases in 3 numbers that were online 24 hours, 7 days, and ensuring them that even though there is a COVID isolation, the institutions are functioning normally to provide you with the service providers, to provide you with the service. So the campaigns, the awareness campaigns actually in Kosovo are continuous, I mean, throughout the year. But most, like the period where we are targeting mostly the audience, the young people, students in high schools, etc., is during the 16 days campaign. So during the 16 days with our UN Women office, we mobilize with all the women's organizations to reach out to the most the far regions to spread the information and inform the population about where they can report the cases of violence.
So in Kosovo, are you still conducting a survey to estimate the prevalence of domestic violence beside this platform?
Yes, of course. For example, during pandemics, three assessments we did. One we did on the access, so the access to the services for DV survivors with the assistance of shelters and other service providers. So we wanted to know what are the challenges that the DV survivors are facing to access services, no matter if it's police, health, or social service. So one was that, and then there was another assessment done during COVID on the economic situation, in the impact of businesses and violence and disabilities, etc. And now the recent one that we did as a second phase was the needs of the shelters, assessing the needs of the shelters to ensure that now, since the shelters are overburdened with a higher number of DV survivors, to ensure that they can help survivors to reintegrate in society through the economic empowerment. So what we did, we went shelter by shelter to see what they would need to help women establish businesses or find a job, so that they can proceed after the shelter will integrate in a normal life. In Kosovo, according to the law, you can stay in a shelter only up to 6 months. Sometimes it's extended, because if there's no place to go, of course, they will remain in shelter. So to make this process of reintegration through economic empowerment, we ensured, first of all, to have this assessment done to see what is the situation and what they need to empower women. And now we are providing assistance through shelters to ensure that women will get this economic support and hopefully very soon open their own businesses and reintegrate in the normal society.
Nice, thank you. I have one final questions. Do you think there is association between the level of awareness of the victims about their rights of reporting and to who to report, and the level of the responsiveness rate in surveys?
I'm not sure if I understood the question.
Okay, when you conduct the surveys, I have concern because some people, they refused to report their cases for some reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they're afraid to get hurt physically or anything. And do you think there is association between the level of the awareness of victims and the response rate in survey when you estimate the prevalence rate of domestic violence?
Well,
Go ahead, Viora, but I would also like to respond, but you can go ahead first.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm still not sure if I understood the question, but in our case, the number of violence has increased during the COVID, and as Unkal did it in her poll, the earlier question, actually, we consider this in a way as a positive, because then we are confident that women knows now how to report the cases, and they know where to report the cases, and also they are confident that they will get the assistance. This is very important. I mean, this is the critical component of our work, to make women believe that the system will respond to their need. Once we reach this, of course, we will have a higher number of reported cases, but we also have to work towards building this confidence among women DV survivors to actually believe that the system will respond to their needs and will help them, I mean, to stay away from or remove them from a violent family or home or space.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks, Viora. If I may ask as well, because I think your question was also related to surveys, and I have two observations. One, in Europe, for example, there was a survey done to the then 28 European Union members, and the countries where the prevalence of violence was highest were the Nordic countries, and the countries where, in theory, there are like more policies around gender equality. So your question actually is very pertinent. It was like, how come the countries where we considered where gender equality is higher, they have higher rates of, or higher prevalence rates of violence based on the survey data. And the reasoning was exactly what you're saying, perhaps because there's more awareness of what acts of violence constitute violence. There's more sense of their rights. So when they are asked about their experiences of violence, they are able to recognize certain acts and behaviors of their partners and the people around them as violence more easily than in societies where gender equality hasn't been realized at the same level. So the response is, that's an hypothesis, we don't know, but the fact that higher awareness around violence and around services may lead to women reporting their experiences as violence more easily, that's an hypothesis. And then the other thing I wanted to say, somehow related, is that the standards and good practices around doing surveys have a very important component around the training of the interviewers. So when there are surveys, precisely to avoid what you're saying, precisely so that if I am interviewed about my experiences of violence by a partner, it's a very sensitive topic. It may be very difficult for me to talk about sexual violence by a partner, by my husband. So the interviewers, we usually recommend indeed 3 weeks of training of the interviewers, so that there is a possibility of establishing a rapport with the interviewee, so that the woman who is interviewed understands what questions are being asked, so that she feels comfortable and safe also to report and disclose experiences of violence that may be very hard to disclose, so that also improves the reliability of the data that are collected, so that it doesn't depend on how confident I am to talk about my experiences of violence or how aware I am of specific acts being violence or safe to report, but it depends on the interviewers are trained in such a way that actually all women who experience violence feel safe and comfortable and confident to report their experiences, so that the results of the survey are the closest to reality as possible. So just wanted to say those 2 points.
Great.
But
At this point, so do you recommend to conduct the survey? It's like online survey instead of face-to-face interview. Do you think this will affect the response rate?
That's
and
what
accuracy in the data?
Yeah, and that is precisely why during COVID-19, we have recommended to be very cautious when doing online surveys and telephone surveys around violence against women. There have been some experiences, and in the region where you are, where there have been online services where measures to address safety have been taken into consideration, but that may affect the response rate. That may affect the response rate and may affect also how comfortable women are in reporting violence. And that's why the best standard recommended to do surveys on violence against women is face-to-face, or if it's on the phone, it's still with very well-trained interviewers. But still, there are ways of interviewing online and remotely around the impact of COVID-19 on violence without asking women directly around their experiences of violence. So their experiences, for example, around asking women about if they know someone that has experienced violence, or how safe they feel. Instead of asking them if they have experienced violence, asking them how safe they feel at home, or how safe or unsafe they feel in public spaces. So their experiences and their recommendations on how to do this remotely in a way that respects the safety of the women and that doesn't put women at risk. But as the best standard in non-COVID times is doing face-to-face interviews with very well-trained interviewers. And during COVID or during lockdown, then all these things need to be addressed. And the 2 papers that I showed in the PowerPoint that are in Arabic, the decision tree and then the brief, which are short documents, have specific recommendations around that. But I think, we have Manal here with us and other colleagues in the region, and also in UN Women, who have done remote assessments, putting in place safety measures.
Great, thank you. So do we have any questions؟ هل في أسئلة؟
Dr. Amal, this is Manal from your Norman Regional Office. I see some questions, if I may translate them to my colleagues.
Yes, please, go ahead.
There was a question about the inclusion of women with disabilities. How do you capture the needs of these women also in the systems, and whether there is a possibility to include them? There was also a question about how do you deal with women who do not want to report? For instance, if you have a woman who enters the services through a shelter or the social sector, but then these women don't want to report to the police. How is this managed also through the system? What is being done in Kosovo for that? So these are the two questions that I could capture in the chat.
If I may, I think Albina already presented the database. There is a tab for women with disabilities in the database. Whereas for the cases, the reporting cases, for us, it's mandatory for the shelter or whoever is the first recipient of the DV survivor to inform the police, because by law, it's the police who takes the legal, initiates the legal actions. I'm not sure if there is a case or how do they proceed with cases when they don't want to report to police, but to my knowledge, it's no matter who is the recipient, they have to report the police.
If I can add to this as well, and just the experience from my country, from Spain, and primary health care, because there was a huge debate. And I think that, I mean, whatever the legislation in your country, in Saudi Arabia, in this case, is in terms of mandatory reporting, I know for the health sector and specifically for primary health care, there is a recommendation not to report, because you're missing a great opportunity to establish a relationship of the primary healthcare physician with the victim, with the survivor, and be able to, sometimes maybe that primary healthcare physician may be like the only point of contact and confidence for that woman to share the experiences of violence. They can work together to make a plan that may help the woman in her well-being and her actions to deal with the violence. So I think this depends on the legislation of each one of the countries. I know that in the health sector, specifically, I feel that police and court and probably social services, as Viola says, there are a strict legislation and mandatory, in terms of mandatory reporting. I know that in the health sector, in many countries, mandatory reporting is considered with much more care because of the unique position that healthcare professionals have in being able to accompany the woman throughout the process, and also to respect the autonomy of the woman to decide what she wants to do with the cases. And probably because the cases they see maybe in the health sector are also less serious or less grave. Over.
I think we almost done. Would you like to add anything for the speakers?
Maybe I can start from my end. Thank you very much to all. I see that you've stayed the whole time, and I hope that what we have shared has been useful. We were planning to have some time also to hear from you in terms of how are things in Saudi Arabia in terms of your administrative data collection systems, etc. We have in the PowerPoint presentation a few questions, so maybe they can be helpful as well as you go back to your workplaces and start or have conversations and discussions around this with your colleagues. Maybe they can help us as well. But thanks very much again for the invitation to be here, and we're also sharing our email addresses, so we look forward to continuing being engaged.
Thank you very much, Honkal. Thank you very much, Flora and Albina. And And thank you for enlightening and informative presentation and sharing your knowledge with us.
Hope it was useful. Thanks for this opportunity and wishing you all the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.